Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. We have discussed this before. About this time last year, the government published a position paper saying that they wanted a new security treaty. I'm not sure how far that's got. In November last year, Sophie, you said that if we didn't have a clear understanding by the first quarter of 2018, you were going to be seriously concerned about what it means for individual police inquiries, individual police operations. I don't think we are any clearer. The three main forms of cooperation: Europol, they've said we can't remain members of Europol after leaving the EU. European arrest warrant, Michel Barnier has said we won't be part of that, and the only time that's been parallel negotiations have taken place took 13 years to negotiate for Norway and Iceland. Information sharing is going to be an issue in relation to data protection and so forth. We've got the mayor's six red lines. So I suppose the question is to you, Chris. Are you now planning for a no-deal scenario?
Short answer is yes. I'm going to ask Craig to talk a little bit about the measures that you've mentioned, and then I'll come back in on other contingencies.
So yes, we are planning for that in terms of doing it. You may be aware, if you're not, just so you're aware, Deputy Assistant Commissioner Richard Martin is the national lead for us, as in for policing. He's working with the National Crime Agency, and they're looking at what the loss of effectively what we call 40 instruments will be. So you described a number of things. There are some real practical examples. So a patrolling officer will not get, if there is no deal on security, a patrolling officer will not get alerts from international networks that they would currently get. We will know less about people from this country travelling aboard committing criminality than we would do in the current arrangements. So what we've been doing with the National Crime Agency, and when I say we, I mean UK policing, is looking at what would we need to put in place to do that. It won't surprise you that to replicate those that speed that we've currently got is almost impossible to do. So what we will have, though, are some workarounds and some quite, I think we call them clumsy, they're cumbersome methods and systems that will allow us through going through basically a central referrals scheme that we'll have to set up to go in and access data in that way. But a lot of the things that we currently get real time, we won't get. Now that work is ongoing in terms of that, but that is a real strand of planning that we're doing National Policing and the National Crime Agency in terms of being able to address those issues and be realistic with people about these are the capabilities you've currently got. If there is no deal in this particular area, this is what it means and this is what these things look like.
So, Chris, you wanted to?
On the sort of wider issues, not sort of policing and security specific, but were there to be a so-called no-deal scenario, you'll be aware that the government are looking at all the possible sort of impacts, and we in policing, led by Chief Constable Charlie Hall, have a small team working alongside government departments, and we, the Met, of course, have put some resource into that team and are in very close touch with that team. So in essence, they will be working through the potential impacts in terms of, first of all, sort of our public order work. So, is there likely to be planned protests? Of what sort? How will that be policed? What are the issues at the borders? Will that, if there are, hypothetically queues, what will that mean in terms of policing and any other disorder type issues? And then working alongside the government to see what they think are the impacts on various different sectors. We've seen talk about pharmaceuticals, for example. We've talk about food. Then, in a very sensible, sober way, we are looking at that alongside the government departments. And of course, the London Resilience Forum will be an important part of this thinking as well.
Well, thank you for that. I think it's a question for Craig next. I mean, looking at the cost of, in the widest sense of a no-deal Brexit, in terms of officer time, and financial costs. Have you done some work on what all that adds up to?
So we've started to look at, I talked about, so effectively losing access to systems will require us to put people at the centre, and we've been asked to develop a position as to what that will be, and that work is ongoing as we speak. That will be a relatively, in the scheme of things, a relatively small cost. Sadly, the cost will fall out in various parts of policing around the country where it will take longer to do inquiries, it will take longer to conduct investigations without access to those things we've currently got. And I suspect the reality is some investigations won't progress. It will be far more difficult to progress some investigations when you go back to either bilateral agreements or some of the restrictions that we used to have on doing investigations across borders.
I presume that includes counter-terrorism as well?
Well, potentially yes. I mean, you can't assume counter-terrorism's different for this. One of the great advantages we've always had is that ability to share police-to-police intelligence and those sorts of things. A lot of that can disappear without some of these mechanisms, and particularly the automatic way it's done. I mean, many of you have been out with officers across London. You will know that they get alerts, they get things. What you probably don't know sometimes is some of those have come from European systems. They won't get those.
So potentially, we're going to be less secure.
Well, that's absolutely a potential, and it'll certainly be slower to achieve that level of security.
Okay.
I genuinely don't think you can underestimate the impact of sort of crashing out of the EU without proper frameworks and proper, a proper deal on security. Never mind the rest of the stuff on security. Because Craig and the Commissioner have talked about things being more clunky, more difficult. You can't underestimate it. I mean, there's two things in my briefing, for, just as examples. Before the European arrest warrant was introduced, there were 60 individuals a year that were extradited from the UK. Now, because we have the European arrest warrant, the UK surrenders over 10,000 individuals accused or convicted of a criminal offence. That's just a step change. There will be a step change backwards if we crash out of the EU without a proper deal on this. And then there's the Schengen Information System 2, SIS2, which during 2017 there were 93,832 UK hits on that system from non-UK alerts. When you talk about alerts, I was concerned in November. I am really, really worried that if we don't get a proper deal on security, London and the country is going to be less safe.
So, following up from that, Sophie, we know the Mayor's got the 6 red lines, and I won't list them for want of time. Have you, stroke the Mayor, made any progress with the government and or the EU on those 6 red lines? And also, I saw that the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners called for contingency plans at the least to be in place by March next year. Has any progress been made on contingency plans by March next year, as they've asked for?
So, as Commissioner Cressler's already and Craig have talked about, there are contingency plans being put in place. That I don't wish to, as I said, it is a small amount of comfort in that, because those contingency plans mostly will involve an officer ringing up and asking. Yeah. In the old days, it would have been faxing or whatever. In terms of have we made progress on 6 red lines, no, we haven't made progress. Myself and the Mayor did go and have a meeting with David Davis before he resigned. We are waiting to get a meeting with Dominic Raab on a number of issues, but obviously for me the most important issue that I need to be really concerned about is security. We haven't. You can see from what's happening with the Brexit negotiations, there is very, very little progress, and there's very little comfort in what is happening. And
just going back to something that Cress raised, which is something I hadn't really thought about, and that's the potential public order implications, not of a security no deal, but of the wider issues. We've heard this sort of, I don't know if they're scare stories or genuine risks of food shortages, pharmaceutical shortages, huge queues at the borders, potentially creating other pressures. Well, that is part of it, because it comes down to the policing demands of it, and in fact the Commissioner actually raised this in her wider analysis. I think that's a new aspect which we hadn't really thought about. I don't know if you can say any more about that, Chris.
I think I've said we're involved in planning. We're working with the government.
Okay,
You would expect us to be looking ahead and making contingency plans.
Definitely. I think I'll manage to write Andrew's speech for tomorrow by the sound of it, which is first class. Now, Tony, you want to come in?
Yes, I was struck by what Craig had to say about the large number of hits that we had for using their resources. Tell me, how frequently do European police forces make use of your facilities and your intelligence facilities?
I don't have the reciprocal. It will be an awful lot.
Indeed it would. Isn't it a fact that there is a kind of esprit de corps amongst police forces, not just across Europe, but really across the world, where they seek to cooperate and they seek to cut red tape?
Absolutely, but they need a legal framework to do that.
Well, indeed. Is it absolutely realistic? It has to be a question, I suppose, for the deputy mayor.
I'm not a politician.
It can't possibly be a question. Do you really think that the awesome picture that you have raised, the mayor's red lines and the stuff that we have just had from Assembly Member Dismore about people queuing in the streets and riot and all this sort of stuff, how have you and the Mayor's Office actually tested that gloomy hypothesis to say that these things will happen, set against the point that I've just made about in policing, in security and all of these matters? There has always been a supranational cooperation which will continue to remain.
That's some question.
No, it's not for you.
Oh, well, God, that's reassuring.
It's for the deputy mayor. I want to know what testing the mayor has done, instead of him going around and posturing, saying it is the end of the world as we know it. Patently isn't.
So in terms of, esprit de corps is one thing, will to and absolute goodwill to cooperate is another, and I completely agree with you. The police forces in Europe will absolutely want to cooperate in the interest of their own national security, but international security as well. We had the discussion at the beginning of this committee was around extremism, international terrorism. We are all linked. We are all absolutely linked. But police forces have to act within legal frameworks. If those legal frameworks fall, whatever this esprit de corps is, you cannot do that data sharing on such a level as it is now. So we know that because of the legal frameworks that need to be in place. It should be, I agree with you, it should be absolutely incomprehensible and unrealistic to think we might get to that place. However, the juggernaut is rolling. We do not have those legal frameworks in place at the moment. My concern is time is running out, and we know what will happen if those legal frameworks are not in place, because we have the figures, the data, and the examples where it has made such a difference to be able to use those legal frameworks.
Well, I'm pleased that you accept that there is this, and you talk about manifestly there has to be some kind of legal framework, no matter how obstinate you may think, and clearly from my point of view, the Europeans are in this matter. It really is, isn't it, inconceivable that in this area of cooperation that there will not be a separate agreement relating to security. I understand that you have to make plans for it, but it isn't conceivable in the 21st century that it will actually happen. And for people to go around saying that it is possible that it's going to happen and it's going to lead to some kind of Armageddon really is fear-mongering of the most terrible sort. I'll end there, Chairman. Really.
Thank you. Thank you very much. As ever, a wise intervention by Assembly Member Harbour. Now we're going to move